poverty of spirit. Everything that has been said about mathematical magnitudes is also true with regard to logical concepts, because finite mathematical magnitudes and logical concepts are subject to the same laws. We have established that the laws discovered by us and operating in a space of 3 dimensions are inapplicable, incorrect and untrue in a space of higher dimension. As this is true with mathematics, so is it true of logic. As soon as we begin to consider infinite and variable magnitudes instead of those that are finite and constant, we perceive that the fundamental axioms of our mathematics cannot be applied to the former. As soon as we begin to think in terms other than concepts, we must be prepared to encounter a number of absurdities from the standpoint of existing logic. These absurdities seem to us so because we approach the world of many dimensions with the logic of the 3-dimensional world. We have reasoned already that to an animal, i.e. to a 2-dimensional being, thinking not by concepts but by perceptions, our logical ideas must seem absurd. The logical relations in the world of many dimensions seem equally absurd to us. We have no reason either to hope that the relations of the world of causes can be logical from our point of view. On the contrary, it must be said that everything logical is phenomenal, nothing can be logical there from our standpoint. All that is there must seem to us a logical absurdity or nonsensical, and we must bear in mind always that it is impossible to penetrate there with our logic. The general trend of the thoughts of humanity toward the other world have generally been incorrect, to the extent that in positivism humanity has denied that other world altogether. This is because, in not admitting the possibility of relations other than those formulated by Aristotle and Bacon, we deny the very existence of that which seems to us absurd and impossible from the standpoint of those formulae. In spiritualism an attempt is made to construct the noumenal world based upon a model of the phenomenal, that is, against reason and against nature, because we want at all costs to prove that the other world is logical from our standpoint, that the same laws of causality operate there, just as in our world, and that the other world is nothing more than an extension of ours. The other world of the paranormal or spiritualists in all existing descriptions is a naive and barbaric concept of the unknown. Positivist philosophy perceived the absurdity of all dualistic theses, but having no power to expand the field of its activity, limited by logic and the laws of the infinite sphere, it could think of nothing better than to simply deny altogether. Mystical philosophy alone felt the possibility of relations other than those of the phenomenal world. However, it was arrested by hazy and unclear sensations, finding it impossible to define or classify them. Nevertheless, science must come to mysticism, because in mysticism there lies new method, and then to the study of different forms of consciousness, i.e. of forms of receptivity different from our own. Science should throw off almost everything old and start afresh with a new theory of knowledge. Science cannot deny the fact that mathematics grows, expands and escapes from the limits of the visible and measurable world. Entire departments of mathematics take into consideration quantitative relations which did not and do not exist in the real world of positivism, i.e. relations which have no correspondence to any realities in the visible, 3-dimensional world. However, there cannot be any mathematical relations to which the relation of at least some realities would not correspond. Therefore mathematics transcends the limits of our world, and penetrates into a world unknown to us. This is the telescope by the aid of which we can begin to investigate the space of many dimensions with its worlds. Mathematics goes ahead of our thought, ahead of our power of imagination and perception. Even now, it is engaged in calculating relations that we cannot imagine or comprehend. It is impossible to deny all of this, even from the strictly positivistic, positive standpoint. Thus science, having admitted the possibility of mathematics beyond the limits of the sensuously perceived world, that is, beyond the limits of a world accessible, though theoretically, to the organs of sense and their mechanical aids, must therefore recognize the expansion of the real world far beyond the limits of any infinite sphere, or of our logic, i.e. must recognize the reality of the world of many dimensions. The recognition of the reality of the world of many dimensions is the already accomplished transition to an understanding of the world of the wondrous. This transition to the wondrous is impossible without the recognition of the reality of new logical relations which are absurd and impossible from the standpoint of our logic. So what then are the laws of our logic? They are the laws of our receptivity of the three-dimensional world, or the laws of our three-dimensional receptivity of the world. If we desire to escape from the three-dimensional world and go farther, then we must first of all work out the fundamental logical principles that will permit us to observe the relations of things in a world of many dimensions, seeing in them a certain reasonableness, and not complete absurdity. If we enter therein, armed only with the principles of the logic of the three-dimensional world, then these principles will drag us back and not give chance to rise up from the earth. First we must throw off the chains of our logic, which is the great liberation toward which humanity must strive. A person, throwing off the chains of three-dimensional logic, has already penetrated through to another world, and not only is this transition possible, but it is accomplished constantly. Although unhappily we are not entirely conscious of our rights in another world and often sacrifice these rights, regarding ourselves as limited to this earthly realm, paths do nevertheless exist. Poetry, mysticism, the idealistic philosophy of all ages and peoples preserve the traces of such transitions and following these traces, so that we ourselves can find the path. Ancient and modern thinkers have given us many keys with which to open mysterious doors, many magical formulae, before which these doors open of their own accord. However, we have failed to understand either the purpose of these keys or the meaning of the formulae. We have also lost the understanding of magical ceremonies and rites of initiation into mysteries which had but a single purpose, to help this transformation in the soul of man. Therefore the doors remain closed, and we even denied that there was anything of value behind them, or suspecting the existence of another world, we regard it as similar to our own yet separate from it. We try to penetrate there, unconscious of the fact that the chief obstacle in our path is our own division of the world into this and that. The world is one, only the ways of knowing it are different, and with imperfect methods of knowledge it is impossible to penetrate into that which is accessible to perfect methods only. All attempts to penetrate mentally into that higher noumenal world, or the world of causes by means of the logic of the phenomenal world, if they did not fail altogether or did not lead to castles in the sky, gave only one result. In becoming conscious of a new order of things, one lost all sense of the reality of the old order. The visible world begins to seem to us fantastic and unreal. Everything all about disappears and vanishes like smoke, leaving a dreadful feeling of illusion. In everything we feel the abyss of infinity, and everything plunges into the abyss. This sense of the infinite is the first and most terrible trial before initiation. Nothing exists. A poor miserable soul feels itself suspended in the infinite world, and then even this void disappears. Till nothing exists, there is only infinity, a constant and continuous division and dissolution of everything. The mystical literature of all people abounds with references to this sensation of darkness and emptiness. Such was that mysterious deity of the ancient Egyptians, about which there exists a story in the Orpheus myth described in the Ancient Wisdom, an outline of theosophical teachings, published in 1939 by the Theosophical Society of London and written by Annie Besant. See introduction on page 23, in which it is described as thrice unknown darkness, in contemplation of which all knowledge is resolved into ignorance. This means that we must feel the horror of transcending all limits as we approach the world of causes, armed only with knowledge of the phenomenal world, our instruments of logic having proven useless because all the new eludes us. In the new as yet we sense chaos only, the old has disappeared and gone away, becoming unreal. Horror and regret for the loss of the old is experienced, mixed with horror the new, unknown and terrible by its infinitude. At this stage we experience the same thing that an animal becoming a man would feel. Having looked into a new world for an instant, it is attracted by the life left behind. The world which it saw only for an instant seems but a dream, some distant vision and the creation of imagination. But the familiar old world too is never thereafter the same. It is too narrow, and in it there is insufficient room. As humanity, we have all experienced this transition because in a time before this, we too were animal. The awakening consciousness can no longer live the free life of the beast because already it knows something different. It hears some voices even though the body still holds it. The animal does not know where or how it can escape from the body or from itself. A man on the threshold of a new world experiences literally the same thing. He has heard celestial harmonies, and the wearisome songs of earth can touch him no longer, nor do they move him. Or if they do at all, it is simply because they remind him of celestial harmonies, inaccessible and of the unknown. He has experienced the sensation of an unusual expansion of consciousness, when everything was clear to him for a single moment, and he cannot reconcile himself to the sluggish earthly toil of the mind. These moments of the sensation of infinity are accompanied by unusual emotions. In theosophical literature and in books on occultism, it is often asserted that on entering the astral world one begins to see new colors, colors that are not in the solar spectrum, although it should be remembered that we see only 3 out of 7 colors in the solar spectrum. In this symbolism of the new colors of the astral sphere is conveyed the idea of those new emotions which we begin to feel, along with the sensation of the expansion of consciousness, of the sea pouring into the single drop. This is the strange bliss of which mystics speak, the heavenly light which saints see during ecstatic revelation, the new sensations experienced by poets. Even conversational psychology identifies ecstasy with entirely unusual sensations, inaccessible and unknown to us in everyday life. The sensation of light and of unlimited joy is experienced at the moment of the expansion of consciousness, the unfolding of the mystic lotus of the Hindu yogi, at the moment of the sensation of infinity, and it yields also the sensation of darkness and of unlimited horror. So what does this mean? How do we reconcile the sensation of light with the sensation of darkness, the sensation of joy with that of horror? Can these exist simultaneously, and do they occur simultaneously? They do indeed, and must be exactly so. Mystical literature gives us examples of this. The simultaneous sensations of light and darkness, joy and horror, symbolizes the strange duality and contradiction of human life. It may happen to one of dual nature, who, following one side of their nature, has been led far into spirit, but on the other side remains deeply immersed in matter, i.e. in illusion and unreality, to one who believes too much in the reality of the unreal. Generally speaking, the sensation of light, of life and of consciousness penetrating all, the sensation of happiness gives a new world. But the same world to the unprepared mind will give the sensation of infinite darkness and horror. In this case, the sensation of horror will arise from the loss of everything real and from the disappearance of an old world. In order not to experience the horror of the new world, it is necessary to know it beforehand, either emotionally, through faith and love, or intellectually through reason. One must renounce all the beautiful bright world in which we are living. One must admit that it is ghostly, phantasmal, unreal, deceitful, illusory and maiavic. One must reconcile oneself to this unreality and not be afraid of this, but rejoice in it. One must give up everything and become poor in spirit, i.e. make oneself poor by the effort of one's spirit. This most profound philosophical truth is expressed in the evangelical symbol, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." These words become clear in the sense of a renouncement of the material world only. Poor in spirit does not mean poor materially in the worldly meaning of the earth, and still less does it signify poverty of spirit. Spiritual poverty is the renouncement of matter. Such poverty is when an individual has no earth under their feet and no sky above their head. Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head. This is the poverty of one who is entirely alone, because father, mother, brother, sister, other human beings, and even the nearest and dearest here on earth, we begin to regard differently, not as we regarded them before, and renounce them because we discern the true substances that we are striving toward. Just as in renouncing the phenomenal illusions of the world, we approach the truly real. The moment of transition, that terrible moment of the loss of the old and the unfolding of the new, has been represented in innumerable allegories in ancient literature. To make this transition easier was the purpose of the mysteries. In India, In Egypt and in Greece special preparatory rituals existed, sometimes merely symbolical and sometimes real, which actually brought a soul to the portals of the new world and lifted those veils at the moment of initiation. However, no outward rituals and ceremonies can take the place of self-initiation. The greatest work must always be going on inside the soul and in the mind. How then can logic help us to pass to the consciousness of a new and higher world? We have seen that mathematics has already found the path into the higher order of things. Penetrating there, it first of all renounces its fundamental axioms of identity and difference. In the world of infinite and fluent magnitudes, a magnitude may be not equal to itself. A part may be equal to the whole, and of two equal magnitudes, one may be infinitely greater than the other. All of this sounds like an absurdity from the standpoint of the mathematics of finite and constant numbers. However, the mathematics of finite and constant numbers is itself the calculation of relations between non-existent magnitudes, and is therefore an absurdity. Hence only that which from the standpoint of this mathematics seems an absurdity can be the truth. Logic now pursues the same path. It must renounce itself and come to perceive the necessity for its own negation. Then out of it a new and higher logic can arise. In his book, Critique of Pure Reason, Immanuel Kant proved the possibility of such transcendental logic. Long before Bacon and earlier than Aristotle, in the ancient Hindu scriptures the formulae of this higher logic were given, opening the doors to mystery. However, the meaning of these formulae was rapidly lost. They were preserved in ancient texts but remained there as some strange mummeries of extinguished thought, words without any real content. New thinkers again discovered these principles and expressed them in new words. Yet again they remained incomprehensible, and once again they suffered transformation into some unnecessary ornamental form of language, but the idea persisted. A consciousness of the possibility of finding and establishing the laws of a higher world has never been lost. Metaphysical philosophy never regarded the logic of Aristotle as all-embracing and all-powerful. It built its system outside of logic or above logic, unconsciously treading the same path of thought paved in remote antiquity. Higher logic existed long before deductive and inductive logic was formulated. This higher logic may be referred to as intuitive logic, the logic of infinity, the logic of ecstasy. Not only is this logic possible, but it exists, and it has existed from time immemorial. It has been formulated many times and has entered into philosophical systems as their key, but for some strange reason it has not been recognized as logic.